So today's agenda, we have 4 key things that we're covering. Looking at how communities share and use information, how to build and measure trust, really looking at that from the communication perspective as well as the organisational perspective, how to set message objectives within an event, and how to develop and adapt messages. So they're the broad 4 that we're going to be working through. And the rough format is we'll share some of the research work that we've done to give you some insights about what's happening, and then have a little bit of a workshop based around that, so your voices can lead the discussion around that. And we're roughly looking at about 40 minutes per block of activity. So the break will happen after trust. Okay, any questions about that? Or cool. Okay, so let's kick it off. And thinking about how communities use and share information. One of the things I think Mark, when he was talking about the work that we do and the research perspective we take, is very much community-centred. So we see ourselves almost as researchers, but also as advocates for the community. Here's what people are saying they want in messages. Here's what's important to them, and here's how they use information. So we do adopt that lens when we're talking about the research work we do. You can't come to QUT or to researchers and not expect to see theory, that it is not going to be too deep. A lot of our work draws on the protective action decision-making model, which has been adapted by Lindell and Perry, researchers who are quite well published in this field. And it's a multi-stage model, and I guess what I just wanted to share with you here is sometimes we have the assumption that a warning is issued and people will immediately act on that warning. So this is the block or the stage where people are taking actions to either protect themselves against an event, seek more information, but we kind of assume that a message hits and boom, we get this response that we want. But this model breaks it up into a number of different stages that it's important to be mindful of. So community members or the public first need to actually want to receive your information. It needs to break through, cut through into their daily activities to get their attention, and they need to be able to understand or comprehend the message, the particular elements of what you're asking them to do. And then as they go through that process, they really assess it and they break it down to help them eventually make a decision. So there's a lot of processing that can sometimes happen, and it's not as quick as we think, and because there's a lot of mental models and mental thinking that happens before you actually take the action that you're looking to do. And certainly as the behaviours are being enacted, so if it's I'm going to start cleaning my gutters, or I'm going to pull together my emergency kit. Whatever the actions are, there are certain ways or messages we can do to facilitate those or help break down some of the barriers that might be there. But there is an element of stress, of course, that also links in with these kinds of decisions. So this is a way of, I guess, showing the value of information. So sure, the warning message sits here, but there are a number of different elements that are critical drivers to help people move through this process. And of course, it was presented in a beautiful linear fashion there. It doesn't necessarily work that way. It can be quite chaotic. So to follow that line of thinking about here is what the community members do or don't do, and you'll see that there are 2 different slides here, one for bushfires and one for floods. This was some research that we undertook with community members just this year to help understand what kind of information sources and platforms they were using to seek information about bushfires or about floods and storms. So the sample of this was 721 participants for bushfires. There's probably nothing too unusual here, except in some cases we thought family and friends would be higher, but it doesn't seem to play out that way. And television is a really important go-to platform for these participants. floods, the big difference or comparison point, I guess, for floods versus bushfires is that the Bureau of Meteorology becomes a really strong player within that. And I think this kind of talks a little bit to the value of interagency messaging and work that kind of naturally happens. But I guess I wanted to throw to you, I know some of you do this kind of research anecdotally or post events. Is there anything in there that's different to what you might have seen, or is it all more confirmatory? When we presented this last week, Ian McKenzie was at a workshop with that we were with AFAC, looking at creating a national framework for flood warnings, and he did mention that the family and friends tended to move up a little bit during an event as an important information source. So something to keep in mind. And I want to throw now to Brooke, who can share with us some of the research that you've done around this space.
It's great to be with you here today. If I speak in any Americanisms, I'm learning a lot of Australian jargon here. Let me know I'm making no sense. My favorite one so far is "you're a legend," which is what we say, like you're a superhero in the US, but it's more common here. So if I use anything like that, just stop me and raise your hand. So when we think about social media in routine times as well as during disasters, we might think about just as mass public, we're sending our message out and hoping it sticks with someone, right? But there's actually quite a bit of research that categorizes different types of people online. And understanding those different types of people might help you identify the different categories in your own communities. And so you're not throwing the message out to everyone, you're throwing out to certain people that might have more influence. And so the Pew Internet Center, which is a think tank in the US, has done quite a bit of research surrounding this. And they've identified these primary categories. We have people that are content creators, that would be you all, but also people out in the community creating their own content. In America, less than 46% of Americans actually create their own content. So still about half of the people are creating their own content. But most people are actually content curators or lurkers. So content curators are the people you want, right? The people that retweet your message, share your message, aren't creating their own official warning or their own official risk communication, but sharing what you're doing. We also have lurkers, which actually is the majority, at least in America, people that just read it. They don't do anything. So a lot of times people say, oh no, I only got 200 retweets. Yeah, but how many eyeballs actually read it? A lot more than that. So sometimes you want to think about not necessarily just looking at the very simplistic measurement tools we have, but thinking about it's probably reaching a much larger public. So we want to be able to identify who our primary content creators are in our local communities. If you probably know some already, if you can think about people who might be doing a lot of social media work. If not, certainly worth looking to find who those people are. I'll give you an example in the Jersey Shore, which is where Hurricane Sandy hit, got wiped out. There was a gentleman that just created a hurricane awareness website because he had experienced Katrina, and when he moved to New Jersey, he wanted to be ready. Very few people were on that Facebook site, but when Sandy hit, it exploded. And people were sharing with their neighbors they had never met before which gas stations were open, who had food they could share with other people, who had blankets. And so the community came together, not on the official emergency management social media, but on this random Facebook page this guy in the community created. He's now BFFs with the local emergency management, and they're doing a lot more partnering. So that's an extreme example. But are there other people maybe you can think of in your communities that are very active on social media, that are well trusted? They could be other government officials too. We see in the US local broadcast meteorologists are highly trusted, not the official government meteorologists, but the local ones. So think about who those trusted people are. You also have novices. Those are people who are new to social media. And disasters are a fantastic time to get them involved in your network. So a lot of people, for obvious reasons, want to know what's happening in a disaster. So they might start following you for the first time, using your social media. And if you can keep them in the loop, then they're going to get your warning communication earlier next time. And we do see pretty high retention in the US in terms of first-use social media users keep on the networks afterwards. We have elders. So those are people, not necessarily that are old, but used to be really active in social media, and for whatever reason are not, but during a disaster they still might come up. So they might not be people that are frequently creating content, but in a disaster there's people that you want to reach out to. And then the power users, the people that are posting all the time, maybe positively, maybe negatively. So knowing who are those people that are spreading rumors and generating misinformation. We also find from the research in the States that most people still rely on traditional media for facts, despite the fake news comments we see from certain people back home, that people still look for traditional media for facts. Social media is more to check on to see if your family and friends are safe. So in terms of your messaging strategy for what warning, information, risk communication you might want to put online, that might be more about keeping family safe, checking on family, making sure everyone is aware of what's going on, whereas the information from the journalists is where people are going to be going to figure out where's the storm turning. What's happening now, the official warning information. And so we see that in the States, people are playing off of that to put the more kind of family first information on social media and thinking more about the official channels to get out the more scientific risk information. So looking at some of the research we've done for the Department of Homeland Security, why do people use social media for disasters? And why do people not? Which is important to know as well. So you can see the reasons up there. I'm going to highlight a couple. Social norms. So my friends and family do it, so I'm going to do it as well. So who are those pockets in your communities that are not on social media and don't have people in their networks telling them to be on social media? You're going to have to reach them somewhere else. Humor and levity, which I learned from Amisha, is not a word you all use very often. But the idea that during hard times, people need something to be a little happy about. So the cute cat picture, or the person that was saved, or something just to lighten up, especially in the preparedness, and recovery, not me trying to get them to do something a little bit more serious. But people look to social media for that, and it actually has positive outcomes in their ability to take some more of the serious actions and process it. Obviously, information seeking, particularly timely information. We see in the States that disasters are first reported on Twitter, typically, before they get an official message out for things like earthquakes or tornadoes. So it can be the first source of information to figure out how bad the disaster is, to self-mobilize, to volunteer, and to also get emotional support and healing. So we find when communities have to evacuate, maybe the only place they can connect with their community is via online. And so it's a real important way when they cannot come back to their community to still feel connected to their communities. And so agencies can help with that, and they can provide spaces for that to happen. After Hurricane Katrina, the American Red Cross put a big effort into creating websites where you could go identify where your family is, and then you could have a space to do that. So providing official ways to do this can be very helpful. Why aren't people fans of social media? Privacy, security, scams, and of course, lack of access. So the power lines go down, people need to turn off their phones. And so you want to be very careful, of course, about social media being your only channel, or people not being aware of the other channels of information that you might have. Also, lack of access. We see in the US very high penetration, so upwards of about 90% of people own smartphones. But a lot of our lower socioeconomic status don't have it consistently, so it's turned off because they can't pay their bills. Or it's a family phone, and it's shared among many people within that family. So while you might think sending out text messages is going to reach everyone, not in certain pockets where that phone's turned off half the month, or someone else in the family has the phone that day. So thinking about whether people are actually going to get that message. And lack of knowledge. New social media seem to pop up every single day. I'll show you a chart a little bit later that shows thousands of different social media channels organized by category. And so people don't always know how to use these and whether they even should be using them. So in terms of different types of social media, those are the primary categories we see. I'll just give you a couple of examples of how emergency management agencies in the States have used them in a little bit of an innovative way. So Angie's List, do you guys have that here? So Angie's List is where we go to find plumbers and people to help our house. And so you get reviews of other people and you see whether you want to hire that. We've seen a lot of schools use that for volunteers. So after major disasters like earthquakes or tornadoes, they'll post to please come to the school at noon if you want to volunteer to help with cleanup. So thinking about a place where if your community is on that site a lot for home repair and homes just got destroyed, maybe that's a place people might go even though it's not a traditional emergency management channel by any stretch of the imagination. With Twitter, we saw the Centers for Disease Control, as well as the WHO, were able to predict the outbreak of H1N1 quicker than people going out into the public to do surveys. Because people were reporting their illnesses online, and that data you got instantaneously. So being able to predict outbreaks is actually scientifically quicker on Twitter than it is actually going out to communities to collect that data. We also saw that with the recent Ebola outbreak that on Reddit, someone who volunteered to be a part of the vaccine trials posted a stream on it and was trying to encourage other people to do it and was answering people's questions. People weren't going to our government agencies to get those questions answered. They were going to this random dude who participated in the trial. Thankfully, he was actually he was in the university studying biology, so he knew a little something about what he was talking about. But he was answering people's questions about whether they should volunteer for the trial or not. And it turned out actually quite good. Are these channels that your publics or your community members are using, or how are you guys using these or not? Some? Okay. Okay. So here is my favorite map. You're not going to be able to see it well. This is a consulting agency in the US. They just do this for the greater good. Every year they provide this map. It's live linked, so if you download it, you can link on it. We'll show you all these different social media sites. And they link it by things like social networking, professional, international sites. So if you're doing a disaster response in multiple countries, by the location. But it's kind of fun. Every year new things pop up and go off this. But it's fun to kind of play around if you want to think about different social media channels that you might want to consider using. And they update it about January every single year to kind of give the new international map on where we are with social media. Even gaming sites and things like that. And we've seen, at least in the health agencies in the States, are using gaming to get people thinking about preparedness. So we have our zombie apocalypse app that you can think about how you would evacuate if you want to. FEMA has one as well. So even things like that that you don't think traditionally about, maybe how you could get people involved in preparedness. So it's kind of a fun thing to do over lunch to see what else is going out there in terms of the social media landscape. So I want to now talk a little bit about the research we've done in social media. So the Department of Homeland Security funded my team in 2013 to do the first study on how people use social media in the context of a terrorist event and a fire event. And they were particularly interested in were people using DHS social media versus other channels. So where did the public want to go to for information about terrorist events or fire? Who did they trust? And what did they do when they received that information? So we did fire and a hypothetical terrorist attack at a college student sample, and then the terrorism attack at a national sample. So I'm only going to present the national sample. But the findings were almost identical at the student sample, even though we thought there'd be quite big differences between terrorism and natural disasters. Conveniently, we actually started data collection a month before the Boston Marathon bombings, and we were testing a hypothetical bombing. So we're also able to test whether people were exposed to the marathon, either directly experienced it or were active media consumers, and how that affected their response to our experiment. So we had kind of a natural experiment going in our lab experiment. So here's the infographics my PR team, not me, put together. But what it basically shows is that it doesn't matter where people get the information from. We tested national government and we tested local government. So San Francisco Office of Emergency Management, where the hypothetical bombing was occurring, or DHS. We tested national media versus local media. Didn't matter where people got their first warning from. No. So we conclude from that, it's the message matters more than the source. People want information, and they're less concerned about who's sending it because they're experiencing a terrorist attack, right? And so they want to do something. They want to, in this case, it was evacuate was the recommended action. We also wanted to look to see what do people do when they receive the information. And they obviously seek more information. So where do they go? Most people aren't just going to get the warning and say, okay, I'm going to get my go bag, I'm going. They want to see how serious this is, does it really affect them? So where do they go for that information? They went to friends and families. So the information they sought first was, hey, did you get this? Do you think it's serious? Should I do this? So not unfortunately going to DHS's website or an official source or even the media, but talking with friends or families. And we've seen this consistently since the 60s. So pre-social media, we saw this as well. But we were a little surprised to see it with social media, given that you had a lot more access to online information. We did see differences by gender and age, as you would expect. Females were more likely to follow what the government told them to do, and males were not. Males are more likely to watch online videos, though, so that's super helpful when you're supposed to be doing something like, evacuate. So definitely a gap in preparedness and response education, especially for males that are not around females, to help push them out. We also have the same thing with older adults, you would expect. effect. People that have experienced more disasters maybe trust the government more. So older adults were more likely to follow the recommended actions than younger adults. And so what this tells us is that it's more important, again, to get the message out correctly than necessarily who it comes from. And we want to do what we can to mitigate that information seeking. We don't want them talking to friends and family about what to do. We want to provide information that can potentially motivate them to take action on their own. Others have done similar research showing how agencies push out similar information at the same time. It's not the exact same message, but more than one government agency pushes out complementary information, people are more likely to take action. And so there are ways that we can maybe decrease this friends and family phenomena, but we know it's probably still going to happen. So here's another example of a crisis that happened in the States. And this is an example of the humor and levity I talked about before, but also maybe how you can take advantage of a rumor situation. So it's called Tigernado, and we'll watch a little video about it first.
Must not travel. Odds are you won't be able to get to your destination because the roadways will be flooded and closed, some cases blocked by debris, some cases blocked by high water that is running, other cases blocked by officials who are out here trying to manage this flood emergency that's going on in South Oklahoma City, Moore, and Norman. Kevin and Linda, that is what we have right now. I don't think there's any imminent problem with the tornado. The flash flooding certainly is the main threat right now.
All right, we're following up on several stories we told you about earlier. We do know that Grady County authorities are around that area where the tiger safari had a direct hit by a tornado. Tigers and other wild animals are on the loose. They ask that you stay in your home. If you see an animal, don't attempt to contact it. Call 911 so they can get authorities and wildlife experts into the area to get those tigers and wild animals back into their cages.
Absolutely. That is just amazing that also happened this evening. And we're hearing now that a state trooper is en route to assist the Norman Police Department with a water rescue. Norman PD requested a boat with a motor to assist several vehicles and their drivers stalled in water on Indian Hills and Eastern in their city in Norman. They need boats to get cars out of the water right now.
And also, if you had students who attended some school.
Okay, so tigers are on the loose. The thing is, though, they weren't. It was an anonymous tip that just thought it'd be funny to share that, and the media just ran live with it.
The target area commute on May 31st, 2013 was a grim reminder of the potential destruction a volatile atmosphere can unleash.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions for you. If you were an emergency manager, how would you respond? So we did some research around the hashtag Tigernado. So the community created a hashtag Tigernado because they're sheltering in place and they got nothing to do, right? So they've got some time on their hands. And so we were curious to see, how did official agencies respond? Did they ignore it? Did they try to tie into it? Did they try to get rid of it? Were they wary of it? And most people were wary of getting into this kind of humorous. So you can see the various agencies I have there. We have Fire and Rescue, we have Weather Service, national and local, we have FEMA, and we only have the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. And that didn't totally disengaged. The only one that actually engaged was the Sheriff's Department. And so they put some tweets out where basically were like, everyone's safe. Tigernado. There's no tiger. Tigernado. So they engaged a little bit. Meanwhile, the public is quite happy about this. So you can still go to Oklahoma City today, 2 years later, and buy a shirt like this. You can buy a mug. You can buy a shot glass. You can buy lots of Tigernado paraphernalia. This is a 1-year anniversary photo, someone with their Tigernado shirt on and their American football helmet. I survived Tigernado, remembering my friends. And so the public actually still uses this hashtag when tornadoes happen as a way to kind of bond as a community. So we were curious, what do you guys think about this? If this is something that's ongoing in your community, would you then maybe try to tag into it in tornado season? Would you try to tag in some preparedness communications? What would you do with this kind of naturally occurring phenomena?